Frankie Montas looked great in his Mets debut, but the Mets bullpen looked awful.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. I don't even know where to start the show today. The Mets got a really good start out of Frankie Montas. We were so worried about how he would look because he was so bad on his rehab stint. Every single start just seemed to be a clunker after a clunker after a clunker. But as Gary Cohen said during the broadcast today, maybe we shouldn't care too much about a big league veteran and what they're doing on rehab, because Frankie Montas looked like the guy that the Mets spent $34 million on, because he was great. And through the first 5 innings, the Mets were fun again, because Montas was a great surprise with how well he threw the baseball. The Mets actually got him some run support, and they were winning, and it felt like, okay, they're going to win this game. They're going to get back on track. I was getting to the point where it felt so good to see the Mets looking like a really solid baseball team again. And I was just starting to envision the rest of this series and the fact that the Mets were going to have a chance on Wednesday to go up against a pitching prospect in Didier Fuentes. And, they did pretty good against Mick Abel over the weekend. So maybe that was going to be a time for the Mets bats to break out, and maybe they could win this series. And maybe they go to Pittsburgh and beat up the Pirates, and we can just forget about what has been the last 2 weeks. And then Huascar Brazoban comes out of the bullpen, walks the first 3 batters that he faces. The bullpen completely melts down. The Mets at bats go from pretty good through the first 5 innings against Spencer Strider, maybe the first 4, because Strider did have a very good 5th inning to close out his day. But all of a sudden, the at-bats fall apart. The bullpen had already melted down and blew the game. And it's another frustrating loss, as the Mets have now dropped 5 in a row to start their season series against the Braves, who are just playing ridiculous baseball. And it's so frustrating because, watch the Atlanta Braves when they're not playing the Mets, and it's a completely different team. But for some reason, they just get so much just thrill out of beating up the Mets. It's like that's all they care about, because they go into Miami, lose 2 or 3. Come right into Citi Field. They've been horrible on the road all year. What do? All of a sudden, you're seeing them make great defensive plays. You're seeing, Matt Olson just destroy the Mets. Nick Allen, what is up with Nick Allen, who's a terrible hitter? All of a sudden, he's got 3 for 3 to start his day today. Like what is going on? Okay, I know that was a rant, and I'm overshadowing what I actually wanted to start the show on as I'm looking back at my notes here. I wanted to talk about how good Montas was, because you look at these first 5 innings, and it really was a joy to watch him pitch. Comes out firing. First batter that he faces is Ronald Acuna Jr., who's arguably the hottest hitter on the planet. It's either him, Juan Soto, or Byron Buxton right now, and he strikes out on a fastball, 96 miles per hour. Got him looking. Then he issues a walk, base hit. Then Montas gets a 5-4-3 double play. A really great turn by Brett Beatty and Ronnie Mauricio to get him out of the jam. Second inning was a 1-2-3 frame. He worked around a single in the 3rd inning, worked around a walk in the 4th, actually worked around a single and a walk in the 3rd inning. And then it was a walk in the 4th, single in the 5th. But again, overall, just really didn't have any real trouble. That 1 inning there, where it was a little bit dicey, was the 3rd inning, where he did work around the single and the walk, and he had a situation with 2 runners in scoring position and Marcell Ozuna up, but blew a 98-mile-per-hour fastball by him. So 3-2 count. First base was open. He threw a fastball out of the zone off the plate, got Ozuna to chase, and was able to strand the runners through 5 innings, 0 runs, 3 hits, 3 walks, 5 strikeouts. And I think what I saw in this start was probably the best fastball I've seen all year from a Mets starter, because a lot of these guys aren't really necessarily fastball pitchers. I mean, Clay Holmes has his sinker, obviously. David Peterson does a pretty nice job with his fastball, but none of those guys are overpowering hitters with fastballs. Kodai Senga can ring it up there pretty high on the velocity chart, but it's not what he does well. It's more using the fastball to set up the ghost fork as the strikeout pitch. You know, Tyler McGill has a good fastball, and there has been starts where he's dominated with it, but it can also get away from him. In this start, Frankie Montas, he was all hard stuff, really. He threw 80 pitches, 71 of them were either the fastball, the four seam, the sinker, or the cutter. He threw 27 four seam fastballs, 23 sinkers, 21 cutters. So he was just leaning into the gas, and it was working for him. He got 18 swings on his four seam fastball, 9 whiffs. So when you're getting 50% whiff rate on your four seam fastball, that shows you how much life the pitch has. And he was really able to just attack the zone with those pitches and had a lot of success. So the one big positive from this game is the Mets have a starting pitcher that I'm excited to see on the next turn through the rotation that really could be a difference maker all of a sudden. So we just wash away the rehab and hope that what we saw in this game is what we see moving forward. And he was on a pitch count. So he was my guess was he maybe had 85 pitches to throw for the Mets. He got through 5 innings at 80 pitches, so it made no sense to have him go back out there and face one batter. In retrospect, maybe they should have, because, again, Brazoban goes out there and just walks 3. But bottom line is, really good start from Montas. And, you know, the Mets actually scored 3 runs in the 4th inning off of Spencer Strider. Really nice rally. Juan Soto starts it off with a walk, steals second base, his 9th of the year. Pete Alonso got a base hit. Starling Marte walks to load the bases. Then Jeff McNeil comes through, really good at bat, gets a sacrifice fly to drive in Soto. Luis Torrens draws a walk to load the bases again. And then Brett Beatty comes through, I believe it was with 2 outs, gets a base hit to drive in 2. So you saw some good at bats strung together there. But after the bullpen completely blew it, again, you had Brazoban come in, walks 3 straight batters, gets the 1 out that he did in this outing, a sac fly. Jose Castillo comes on, gives up a base hit on a low line drive that Brett Beatty made a dive for. It was in his glove. He just couldn't hold on to it. He obviously, could have made that play. It's not like it's something that you knock him for, but it's just kind of the state of the Mets where that ball he's not able to squeeze it. Then Castillo hits a batter, gives up a base hit to Nick Allen, who I hate right now. And that tied the game. You had the sac fly to score 1 run on the low line drive that Beatty couldn't catch. That scored another, and then Nick Allen's base hit tied it up. Reed Garrett comes on to try to stop the bleeding. He does strike out Acuna, but Matt Olson gets a base hit to drive in 2. Braves all of a sudden have a 5-3 lead. Olson would get the Mets again in the 8th inning with an RBI double off of Richard Lovelady. Do we call him Richard? Do we call him Dickie? I guess if you're his friend, if you see him around the ballpark, you call him Dickie. But if you're in a professional setting, I guess this is a professional setting, we'll call him Richard. Regardless, he looked pretty good, honestly, outside of, that double given up to Olson. Daniel Nunez came in, gave up an RBI double as well. That made it 7-3 Braves at that point, with the Mets having a big hole to try to climb out of with only 6 outs to do it. And again, when it comes to the at-bats late in this game, after the bullpen blew it, it felt like all of a sudden the team started pressing again, and the at-bats just got awful. Pete Alonso strikes out on 3 pitches in the bottom of that was the 6th inning after the Mets gave up those runs. So bottom of the 6th inning, Pete Alonso strikes out on 3 pitches and chases a curveball in the dirt that was, nowhere near the zone. And it's not a type of pitch. I don't even think it was even in the dirt. It was in the other batter's box. Regardless, we haven't seen Pete chase that ugly this year. That was a really bad strikeout. Starling Marte gets ahead 2-1, gets a fastball right down the middle at 94 miles per hour, swings through it, looks at ball 3 before striking out looking. Luis Torrens strikes out on 3 pitches. In the 7th inning, Beatty, Mauricio, and Lindor went down in order. In the 8th inning, Nimmo, Soto, and Alonso went down in order. And again, Pete struck out. He was ahead in the count 3-0, swings through 3 straight fastballs. And it's not like 98, 99. It was 92, 93. Couldn't connect with a fastball. Granted, they were pretty well located up in the zone, but still just brutal. And then the 9th inning, the Mets actually rallied. Jeff McNeil had another great at-bat, a 9-pitch at-bat, able to They'll rip a double over the third base bag, so he gives the Mets a chance with one out. Jerry Young gets a pinch hit single, so the Mets have something cooking. The Braves go to Raisel Iglesias with runners at first and third. Brett Beatty comes up, brutal at bat. He gets ahead 2-0. Looks at a fastball that was the pitch to hit, but fine. He looks at it, but then he is able to take another pitch, gets into a 3-1 hitters count. Great. If you walk, the bases are loaded. You ensure, barring a double play off the bat of Ronnie Mauricio, that Lindor will come up. At that point, it's almost, all right, if you get a fastball, swing. But otherwise, you could see that Iglesias came out of the bullpen and couldn't really find the zone. It probably would have made sense to take. Instead, he swings through a changeup in the dirt and just brutal. And then he fouls one off, and then he strikes out looking on a fastball that, granted, was at the bottom of the zone. He argued it. He shouldn't have, because it was definitely a strike. That pitch got so much plate. I don't care if it was low. And if you look at the tracker, it wasn't. It was in the zone. So, you swing at ball 4 and then you strike out looking. Just an awful at bat for Beatty, who, granted, was the guy that drove in 2 of the runs in this game. And he got 2 hits the day before. So he has been swinging it a little better. But, that was a moment there where if he is able to draw the walk, Ronnie Mauricio ends up doubling. All of a sudden, maybe you actually are able to get Brandon Nimmo up at least, because Lindor grounded out. But you never even know. Let's just do the math. It was 7-3. If it's bases loaded in that spot, let's say Mauricio's double just scores 2, because the Mets are playing conservative on the bases. Well, now it's 7-5 with 1 out. Lindor hit a ground ball. It could have been 7-6 with the runner on third base and Nimmo up. But instead, you have Beatty strike out, again, looking after chasing ball 4. It is just a rough game again. And there's just nothing else to say about it. This team will play better at some point, but these games are just brutal to watch. And it's the Braves that are just killing this team. And it almost feels like they just need to get through this series, and then maybe they can get back to normal again. But man, it'd be nice to beat the Braves a couple of times and not just go down. They would lose the season series if they got swept. Lose the season series with 2 series left to play. And the Braves, who have not been good this year, all of a sudden getting back into the race because they have treated the Mets like their World Series, and it's working for them. Don't get me wrong. This very well could catapult them back into the race if they can beat another team after the Mets. But man, it's really frustrating. That's all I can say about it. I'm right there with you all who are sort of hate watching these games when they start to get away from the Mets. You can't look away from the train wreck when it's happening, and it's a frustrating watch. Hopefully the Mets can get back on track, but to do it, they are calling up a pitcher from Double-A because their bullpen is just completely spent. I want to talk about who's coming up here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start to build wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. We are getting pretty close. I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. So the Mets are making a call to Double-A, actually a guy that was heading towards Triple-A because Triple-A needed arms because their arms have been helping the Mets. So they were going to call up Jonathan Pintaro from Double-A to Triple-A. Now they said, you know what, actually, instead of heading to Rochester or wherever the Syracuse Mets are, come to Queens instead. You're going to make your MLB debut. So Jonathan Pintaro is coming up. Will Salmon had the scoop of The Athletic. Pintaro, for those of you who aren't familiar, was one of these sort of diamonds in the rough that the Mets signed last year, signed him out of the Pioneer League. That's indie ball. And he pitched very well for the Mets last season. 2.68 ERA, in 74 innings pitched. That was primarily between high A and double A, but he did make one solid start in triple A as well, where he went 4 scoreless. He appeared in the spring breakout for the Mets. So that shows you how much they really do value this arm. And he's been in double A all season. Across 11 starts, a 3.40 ERA, but was pretty impressive. 57 strikeouts and 42 and a third innings pitched. He's striking out 1 out of every 3 batters that he has faced this year. Has a great splitter, pretty good fastball. That's the combination I think you could expect coming out of the bullpen here. Walk rate of 8.8%. So he's been attacking the zone, getting a lot of strikeouts, and he is a stretched out arm. Again, he was heading to AAA, I think because they needed arms, and now he's been rerouted to the Mets. I think he's 27 years old, so a late debut here for a guy that very well could be on this roster for some time as, a depth arm that you never know, could eventually be a starting pitcher for the Mets. But for now, it's sort of long relief is what they're shooting for here. And my assumption is they're going to have him piggyback Clay Holmes on Wednesday because the bullpen is just completely spent. I mean, everybody you threw in the game tonight, you could say, is not going to be available on Wednesday. You have our boy Richard Lovelady, 31 pitches, so he's probably not going to go back out there, and you don't want to lose him, so he'll stay on the roster, but that's a guy that probably can't be used. Daniel Nunez is not going to pitch a back-to-back. He threw 23 pitches in this game. I think he's looked pretty good in his limited return here, so I don't necessarily think the Mets should option him right back down. I think he might be able to be a potential impact arm for the Mets finally. So I think he stays, but he's not going to pitch on Wednesday. Reed Garrett threw back-to-back, so he's out. And then you have Huascar Brazoban, who blew this game with 3 straight walks in that 6th inning. On May 21st, Brazoban had a 0.90 ERA. Since then, he has given up runs in 6 of his last 11 appearances. He's allowed 11 earned runs during that span. His ERA has gone from 0.90 to 3 flat, and he has a 9.72 ERA in June. He threw 24 pitches in this game. I don't think he's available, or I wouldn't expect him to pitch. Good chance the Mets can't use any of those 5 relievers. Lovelady, Nunez, Garrett, Brazoban, and who is the 5th that I'm forgetting? Castillo. Castillo also threw a bunch of pitches. So if you can't use those guys, who do you have? Jose Budo, Ryan Stanek, Edwin Diaz. That's it. And Clay Holmes, mind you, has shown some signs of fatigue lately. Last start, he looked better, but in Colorado, he said he was feeling some fatigue. And then the next start, they had him on a pitch count. Last start, he was good to go, but I don't know if I can expect Clay Holmes to give them at 7. I mean, most starts this year, you're looking at, 5, 6. So how do you get through the rest of this game? Yeah, ideal blueprint. Everything works right. Even if Clay Holmes goes 5, you get 2 innings out of Budo, 1 from Stanek, 1 from Diaz. But that's everything going exactly right. If Jose Budo is off, where do you go? What do you turn to? So I think this is where Pintaro is getting the call here. He's either going to be the long man for this game or for the next one. And I imagine he probably follows up Clay Holmes. Even if it's a 2-0 Mets lead, I could see the Mets going to Pintaro and just saying, you know what, let's try to eat up some outs and see what happens. And the good news is, granted, you can get data and video on anybody nowadays in the minor leagues, but this is kind of a guy out of left field that maybe takes the Braves by surprise. The one question here, though, is how do you even get him on the roster? That's the other element of this. To get Montas on the roster, the Mets had moved Jesse Winker to the 60-day IL, although I have an update on Winker for the final segment today because it seems like he's actually going to be on his way back a little bit sooner than, I wouldn't say sooner than we expected, but sooner than later, he could be starting a rehab assignment. So we'll talk about that in the next segment. But they had to move Winker to the 60 just to get Montas on the roster. Now, granted, that's not going to impact Winker's return because he's been on the injured list for so long, but that just shows you where the Mets are at their 40-man roster. To get Lovelady on the roster, they had to transfer Jose Siri to the 60. So to get him just on the 60-man roster, the Mets are 60-man roster. To get him on the 40-man roster, there's no other guys to put on the 60-day IL. So the Mets are going to have to make some type of a move to DFA a pitcher. My guess, Jose Castillo gets DFA'd because that just clears the room. That would make the most sense. If you're looking at who's going to get off the active roster, it could be Brazoban if you want to reset him. That is an option for the Mets if they think that he needs to go down and just rest for a little bit and get back to being himself, they could do that. And then they could also then, because Brazoban does have options, they could option Brazoban down, and then they can just cut one of Ty Adcock, Justin Garza, Chris Devanski, Austin Warren, or Tyler Zuber, or they can even theoretically dump Justin Hageman if they wanted to, just because Jonathan Pintaro could technically take that role. Hageman did pitch in Syracuse tonight. So theoretically you can do that. I don't know if they would. My guess would be it'd probably be maybe Austin Warren that would get cut if that is the move the Mets make, whether that is optioning Brazoban or Daniel Nunez. Those are the two guys that have options that the Mets could look towards to bring Pintaro up. But Jose Castillo has not necessarily pitched great. His numbers look okay in a Mets uniform, but I don't know if he's really a keeper. Brooks Raley has thrown the ball pretty well so far. It's in Port St. Lucie. He should be throwing the ball well, but he is a left-handed reliever that you could have back at some point, maybe right before the deadline, depending on how long this rehab stint's going to last. It's probably going to be the full 30 days, and he's about a week into it. So you have, 3 more weeks at least. So maybe at some point on the other side of the All-Star break, we see Brooks Raley back. So if you are looking at your left-handed options and you like Lovelady, maybe you do just DFA Castillo, and that makes the roster move as simple as possible instead of losing one of these optionable arms that you have because you have to cut them to get Pintaro on the roster. And then also, option a Brazoban or a Nunez. And I kind of like Nunez right now. I want to see what he has. Brazoban's been pitching poorly, but at the same time, he's been so valuable for you. So I think you'd probably want to ride it out a little bit longer. So that's where my guess is maybe we see a Jose Castillo DFA, but they're going to sit on that and make the decision to, I should listen to this on Wednesday to try to figure out what to do here. But the bottom line is this team is completely gassed. Their bullpen has been bad now because they've just been so taxed because the starting pitching has been bad, and the lineup hasn't bailed anybody out. So, 2 more games against the Braves. Then you got to go to Pittsburgh and play 3 before you finally get an off day on Monday. This team right now, the free fall could continue, and you just hope that they can stop it before it turns into a little bit of a hole. Right now, yes, you're losing games, but the Phillies lose again too. Yeah, the Houston Astros beat them 1-0. That's nice. So Houston hopefully can keep this division close for you. And then maybe the Braves will actually beat another team other than the Mets, because over the weekend, Philly is going to come into Atlanta. So all of a sudden, man, the Braves, it's wild. I mean, let's just say the Phillies got swept by the Astros, and then the Braves somehow won out this week. I mean, they could be sitting 4.5 games out by the end of the week. I hate them so much. I almost titled today's show, I hate the Atlanta Braves. I guess theoretically I still can as I'm recording this. I have not written that title officially yet, but brutal stuff. In the final segment, I want to talk about some of the updates we got today with David Stern's meeting with the media. We'll talk about Winker. We'll talk about a small setback for Sean Manaea. So I'll get through all of that to close out the show in just a minute. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average, in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Rugiet is completely online and connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnMLB and use the code LockedOnMLB to get 15% off today. That's Rugiet, RUGIET.com/LockedOnMLB. Use the promo code LockedOnMLB for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. If you're an everydayer that's always tuning into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime, take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways, a live graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, Carlos Mendoza said before David Stern spoke to the media that Jesse Winker will begin a rehab assignment, or they're expecting him to potentially begin a rehab assignment this weekend coming up. He'll be DHing at first, and honestly, throw out his glove. We don't need to see Jesse Winker play in the outfield because him playing in the outfield for that one game cost the Mets 2 months of Jesse Winker's bat in the lineup, and they would be a lot better if they had Jesse Winker's veteran bat right now. So to me, they should not even try to get him ready for the outfield. I don't care. Don't play him out there. Just let the guy hit. So that's going to be a big lift to this team, the fact that he's starting his rehab assignment soon. Now, it's going to take some time. This is not going to be a Mark Vientos rehab thing, which we're watching play out right now. It's just going to be maybe 4 or 5 games. No, for Winker, he might need a couple weeks because he's kind of starting from scratch. It's been a long time, and he's also coming off a serious oblique injury, and obliques are very, very tricky. So I don't necessarily think we see him before the All-Star break, but I think we probably see him maybe right after the All-Star break. And there's a chance that the Mets could really get a lot of reinforcements then. I mean, Sean Manaea, we'll talk about him in a second here, but he should be back a little before the All-Star break. Kodai Senga, everything has been checking out well so far. So I don't know if you would get him back right outside the break, but potentially it's not going to be too much of a ramp up to get him back. So the hope is once you get to the other side of that break, you might see a fully healthy New York Mets team with potentially Francisco Alvarez, if all goes well on his rehab assignment, or not rehab assignment, if all goes well on his minor league stint over the next couple weeks, he might be back in the fold. The Mets could get a lot better. They just have to get through these next 3 weeks. But when it comes to Alvarez, he actually got pulled from the game after hitting into a double play ball, I think in the first inning. But he had some dizziness and heat exhaustion, I guess. So doesn't seem like it's overly concerning. But that is why Alvarez was pulled, if you saw that Syracuse Mets box score and were wondering. Now, the other guys that were in that lineup, Luisangel Acuna, batting leadoff, playing shortstop, went 3 for 4 with a walk. Talked about on yesterday's show. He wouldn't tell you this, but I'm sure he had a little bit of fun being back in the starting lineup, batting leadoff. Granted, it's AAA, not the big leagues, but at least he's getting to play. So it's good for him that he's getting this playing time. Mark Vientos went 0 for 4 with 2 walks, played the entire game at third base, though. So he's getting closer and closer to his return. He's going to DH on Wednesday, and then he could be back on Thursday, if not Friday, for the Mets. So that's what's going on in Syracuse. When it comes to the big news of the day, Sean Manaea had a setback, but not a bad one. At least they're making it seem like it's not a bad one. He had some elbow pain after his last start. He got an MRI, and they identified a loose body in his elbow. Now, we see this with pitchers, and they can pitch through it. They eventually can have surgery to remove that loose body. It's basically like a bone chip. But for now, the course of action is a cortisone shot. So he got the shot. He's already starting to feel better. And I mean, Ron Darling talked about it during the game today. He said, when he was pitching back in the old days, he might get a cortisone shot and still make your next start. So this is going to be something where he's shut down for 48 to 72 hours, no throwing. Then I'll get back to throwing bullpens. The expectation, according to David Stearns, is that he will still make a rehab start on Tuesday or Wednesday next week. So this is delaying him a week, but he'll make that start. If all goes well, he could be right into this rotation in the not too distant future. So a little bit of a longer runway for a Paul Blackburn likely in this rotation, which is not necessarily a good thing, but it's what the Mets got right now. So we'll see if he can pitch a little bit better. And the hope is that this is not some type of a serious setback, that Manaea can pitch through it this year. And some guys pitch through loose bodies in their elbow for years, and it doesn't matter. They just are able to pitch through it just fine. But in this instance, this is something that set him back a couple of days, and overall probably set him back 1 week when it comes to when he'll actually make his season debut. But it should still come, if all goes well, before the All-Star break. So the Mets avoided something worse there. So that's the latest updates here on the injury front. Jesse Winker going to be back again, my guess, right after the All-Star break. Mark Vientos will be back this week. Mets will have to make a decision there. Ronnie Mauricio obviously had a nice double late in this game, but I still think Mauricio will be the guy that goes down when Vientos comes up. As I talked about on yesterday's show, it just makes sense to really lean into playing time for Vientos, McNeil, and Beatty and see what you have. So you know what you're going to need at the deadline. David Stearns talked about that a little bit to the media today, where he wasn't going to say anything concrete, but he said that this is where you're gathering information. He said over the next couple of weeks, teams are really focused on the draft. The draft's going to take place All-Star week. I think it's the weekend, actually, before the All-Star break, if I'm not mistaken. But regardless, that's what teams are focused on now. And then they're going to start to make their decisions on what they're going to be at the deadline. And so he said, David Stearns basically is looking at the market now, and it's kind of hard to know what it's going to be until those teams make the decisions on, are they going to be buyers? Are they going to be sellers? And then you can start having dialogue. So don't expect any crazy trades over the next couple weeks. But right now, this is gathering information on what this roster needs. And I do expect the Mets to be pretty aggressive at this deadline addressing this team's needs, because it's a win now year. I mean, it's always a win now year with the Mets in the Steve Cohen era, but particularly after the NLCS run last season and picking up Juan Soto, there's been a lot of hype attached to this team. The first couple months were so much fun. You don't want to watch this season slip away. So I do think eventually the Mets will be aggressive at bolstering this roster, but in the meantime, they want to see what they have in-house to know what they should be getting. And so that's why, again, when Vientos comes up, I expect Mauricio to go down, so you'll see a heavy dose of Beatty, Vientos, McNeil, Marte, and then when Winker comes back, Jared Young, which is pretty much filling the Winker role, Young goes down, and then Winker gets back into the mix, and he will eat into at-bats from a lot of those guys from the DH spot, where you'll probably see maybe some more Vientos at third base. And who knows? I mean, you get to that point that there could be a situation where Vientos is your everyday third baseman again. Winker and Marte are doing the DH platoon, and Beatty becomes your utility infielder at second base, third base, and your pseudo backup shortstop, because you don't need a backup shortstop when you have Francisco Lindor. I could see that as a possibility as well. But for now, that is your latest update on all things Mets. Hopefully, with the help of Clay Holmes, Jonathan Pintaro, and maybe the Mets bats wake up against a 20-year-old pitching prospect that has a really good fastball, but is still very raw. So this is a guy that the Mets can hopefully work. Maybe they can get into that Braves bullpen, but hopefully after scoring some runs against the rookie and get back on track and finally beat the Braves for the first time this year. And if you end up working a split against the Braves and you sweep the Pirates, the Mets would fulfill what I said at the beginning of the week, which was win 5 games. But winning 5 games when you lose the first 2 of the week, kind of looking unlikely for this Mets team to win out. But you never know. Maybe this turns into a good week. It just has gotten off to a rough start. As always, thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on social media at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, check out Locked On MLB Game Night, which will take you around all of the action in Major League Baseball with insight from all of our local experts. You find Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel, as well as the Locked On MLB podcast feed.